So I'm probably gonna make a few people mad with this video, but my goal isn't to make you distrust your coach, but to help you better understand how to learn from a coach and avoid certain cult-like behaviors from both students and coaches. So the first thing to understand is no coach has a mastery of knowledge in all positions. Jiu-Jitsu is so vast and there's so many different positions. No matter how long you've been training, you can't have mastered all positions. Furthermore, Jiu-Jitsu is evolving so fast, even if you knew a position well 2 years ago, it could have evolved so much you're not up to date. So no matter how much a coach is focused on learning, there's always gonna be gaps in their knowledge. Even if you're training with Roger Gracie or Marcelo Garcia, there's gonna be holes in their knowledge. Like Marcelo Garcia didn't play spider guard much, or he probably doesn't crab ride a lot. Roger Gracie probably doesn't do worm guard stuff. So no matter who you're training with, no matter how skilled they are, there's gonna be holes in what they know. No coach, including me, can ever become your ultimate source for your correct answer. So acknowledging this, it's important when you have a coach to understand where the limits of their knowledge is and how you can utilize that to your benefit and help guide the resources you use for your own learning. But way more important than this is that your coach needs to understand where their own limits of knowledge are. And this is where a lot of problems in coaching and learning occurs. The key to being a good coach of technique is not just about having a vast amount of knowledge. In fact, you can not know a ton of knowledge and still be a great coach, but it's about knowing where you don't know and accurately conveying the knowledge that you have that you can give to someone, and in the positions that you don't know, being good about guiding people to look for the right resources or helping them with coming to their own conclusions and how to use trial and error to discover the right way through positions that neither one of you may know. All the time, I have students or people ask me questions and I'll say, you know what, and I don't actually play that position a lot, so I don't have a great answer for you. This is my best guess from what I have seen in that position, but if you want to look more into it, I know that this person or that person are great resources on that topic, so you should definitely look them up. In fact, if I'm in the gym, sometimes I'll even refer to a lower belt if I know they have more experience in a position than me. The belt doesn't really matter. The belt is just a representation of how long you've trained or how well you roll on a macro level. But of course, there's blue belts that play positions I don't play who will have way more knowledge than me in that particular position. And that shouldn't challenge you as a coach. It shouldn't make you question your coach if you're a student if they don't have knowledge in every position, because it's practically impossible for them to have that anyway. So what you're looking for with a good coach isn't necessarily just their knowledge, but their ability to accurately reflect what they do know, share what they do know well, and help guide you in positions that neither one of you know. And the reality is there's so much online content now with YouTube videos, paid courses, seminars everywhere. You can get access to so much information online. You should be utilizing all of that and have a great location with a gym that facilitates the learning process by learning from everyone. Remember, if your coach says they don't know a position that well, or they have to talk with another student in the gym to give you a good answer, don't see that as something bad about your coach. In fact, you should see that as a good sign of a good coach. Coaches who don't know a position well, but they try to act like they really know a position well, or they speak way beyond their expertise on a position, often comes from a place of insecurity. It comes from a place where the coach feels like he always needs to have the right answer. And they really shouldn't always have the right answer. They should be able to give you good advice or give you the best guess they have, but they should not be authoritarian with the answers that they give. In my career, I have seen so many coaches or people giving advice be extremely authoritarian with the advice they're giving, and when I'm watching externally, I see the advice they're giving is wrong or won't work well, and I see how frustrating it is for the student. I've had this happen to me in my career a few times as well, where you're trying to do exactly what they showed and you can't get it to work and you're spinning your wheels, and then the reality is in the end, the move they showed literally doesn't work, so that's why it's so frustrating. That's why it won't work, and this can be super demotivating to the point that like some people even quit because they can't get the techniques to work that they're being shown, and it's because an incompetent person is showing them something that really doesn't work. I'm not saying most coaches fall into this, but certainly some do. When you pick a gym, often, especially if you're brand new to Jiu Jitsu, you don't know anything about the Jiu Jitsu community, you don't know about who's a competent competitor, who's a competent coach, really deeply who the person is that you're starting with. So you learn these things over time. So what I'm saying in this video is just try to be aware of competency and where your coach's competency levels are weak and where they are strong, and how he reflects those to the students. A point to the coaches listening to this, or even if you're just a senior student teaching people lower than you, you may feel a bit insecure teaching because you're like, well, maybe I don't know. Maybe how can I give someone advice? Maybe I'm giving them the wrong advice. And this can make people giving advice feel insecure. And you really shouldn't feel insecure about it. The reality is, a lot of times you're gonna give advice, and if you look at that same position a year later, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I would not teach it that way at all anymore. This happens to me all the time. If a year goes by and I'm working on a position, I'll see someone at a seminar, I'm like, why are you doing it like that? And they're like, well, you told me. It's like, oh, okay. I don't do it that way anymore, right? So the reality is, like, jiu-jitsu is always evolving, knowledge is always evolving. All a coach can do is they can give an accurate representation of how they see that position in this moment in time. This is currently how I see the knee cut position. It will probably change in the future. And what this means is, it doesn't mean you should never show anything until you've mastered it, because you never truly will master it, because it's always going to be evolving. But what it means is you should just have a little more humility when you're showing something. When you show something, go like, this is how I like to do it. I find it works really, really well. But if someone's trying something a little bit different, or you have a student who's like, you don't know, they may be watching an instructional from Gordon Ryan doing the pass a different way than you do. And if you tell them, don't do it like that, you always do it like this. It's like, well, someone else does it like that. So it's very subjective what is correct technique. It's a very subtle thing. You just want to understand that, listen to your coach, learn from them. They have tons of knowledge. Save tons of time by listening to them. They have eyes on you to give you constructive feedback, but also at the same time understand the limits of their knowledge. And hopefully if you're training with a good coach, he will be self-aware of this and not be authoritarian with his coaching. In the unfortunate case that you find you have a coach who has a particular pattern like that, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to change him or he's the worst guy in the world. He can be amazing in many other ways. Just sometimes that happens from being in a position of authority for a while. People kind of feel this pressure that they always need to have the right answers, and take their constructive criticism. They probably still have great advice, but when you're off the mat, if you feel like you can't ask questions about techniques that are exactly the way they do it, certainly still continue learning from instructionals, learning from YouTube videos, from other credible sources. This leads to another point, which is be careful where you're getting your information from. Of course, there's tons of YouTube channels, there's tons of instructionals out there, and there's a lot of bad advice out there. I've watched so many instructionals in the past where they showed a technique that later on I found out through talking to someone, they just needed to fill the instructional with more content and they just threw it in there. And that can be really hard. So kind of people build credibility over time. Over time you learn, oh man, Gordon's instructionals, Mikey instructionals are really good. He's really showing the details they actually do. So you want to learn who are reliable sources showing real things, and that's somewhat subjective to figure out. Talk to your coaches. I reference a lot of people. Look around, but there is people out there putting out bad techniques. Of course, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus in the video by name. And I would say this is another big thing about a good gym or a good coach setting a good culture and environment in a gym, is the gym should incentivize or promote people seeking learning externally. Your coach should not be intimidated by you learning through instructionals, through competition footage. These things should be assets. I view all of my students as like researchers for me, and I expect them to be watching instructionals and coming back to me and being like, oh, I saw this thing and it helped me here. And it's like, we're kind of like a collective hive mind, all working together to learn. Obviously, I bring like almost 20 years of experience to the table, so I have a lot of knowledge, but there's so much content out there. Of course, they're learning from everywhere, and we're working as a team to bring stuff together. And if you're in a gym where the coach doesn't like you learning externally, to me, that's a huge red flag, because they should have the hubris to understand that they don't know everything, so their students should be seeking externally, and they shouldn't see it as a challenge to what they bring to the table. And ultimately, this leads to a bigger point, which is no one can be your absolute authority on jiu-jitsu. To really become high level, if you really want to do this a long time, you have to become your own instructor. The way I see it is like, you want to view your instructor as like a guide. There's someone who's gonna help you. They're like a very experienced guide who can give you perspective along the journey, but you have to develop your own understanding of positions and why they work. If your coach shows you this is how I do the knee cut, drill it. Learn to do the knee cut the way he does it, but don't treat it like this is the law. You have to knee cut this way, because there's many different ways to do a knee cut. If you wanna play with his, and then you wanna play with the way I do it, the way Lucas Lepre does it, the way Leandro Lowe does it, and you mix it all up and you'll find your own through trial and error methods that are working well for you, working bad for you, why you think one's working well, why you think one's working bad, and it's always gonna be evolving. Get comfortable knowing that you're never gonna be a finished product. You're always trying to grow, but you wanna grow your understanding. You don't wanna just become a clone of what someone is showing you. And that's what I mean when I say you can't trust your coach. Of course, learn from your coach. I'm not trying to be negative towards your coach, but you need to become your own expert and use those who came before you as guides, but never see them as an absolute law or authority on what is right and wrong. I hope this makes you think a little deeper about how you learn positions or jiu-jitsu in general, because of course techniques and positions and principles matter a lot in jiu-jitsu, but also your philosophy of how you learn, how you think about learning, who you learn with, all is gonna have a massive effect. If you plan on training this sport for 10 plus years, the little habits of how you learn and you think about learning positions and how you exchange with others is gonna have a massive impact on your development. Jiu-jitsu, while it is a physical sport, it is a mostly cerebral sport. That is why someone who's much smaller can beat someone much bigger. It's because they've learned the patterns of how to be in a good position. And while you always wanna increase your physical conditioning, your strength, your cardio, the ultimate goal is to get yourself into a position that you know the right places to be at the right time, because that's what will scale well versus a much larger, stronger opponent. And in my opinion, the true essence of jiu-jitsu is being able to use technique to beat someone much bigger, stronger, or even with better cardio than yourself. And if you guys like this format of video, please leave a comment and let me know any conceptual questions or any thoughts you're having as reference for more kind of philosophical type conversation. And as always, if you guys like the content, like, share, subscribe. Thanks a lot.